Hello and welcome to Camera Review. Today we are looking at Sony's latest camera, Sony A6600. Now it is the long-awaited camera that was supposed to come out many years ago, but have been waiting and waiting, maybe for an initial release that would have made this camera more appealing. Yet now, after 3 years, we have this new camera. If you know about anything about the A lineup, the 6000s all the way up to 6500, they were developed over the years with a little bit of refinements. This camera is a bit different, and I tell you why it's different. I'm not going to talk a lot about the specs, but I'm going to talk about what it is. Imagine you had a car, and that was one of those models cars that they've been sitting in your parking lot, and you wanted to sell it. One of the things that you will do probably is make it shine, you put a bit of wax on it, and then maybe, you may want to change the tires or polish up the rims. And then once you have done it well, you can put it out in the market. Now, what you have done is basically you have made it look better than it was. Or you could do the following. You could take that car and make that car a little better by putting maybe a better exhaust system, or you put a better stereo system in there, or you upgrade it in one way or another, and then you try to sell it. So what happens is you're actually not improving the car itself, but you're making it more desirable. So what we are doing is we're looking at the A6500 and we're saying, how is it different to have a 6600? And is it worthwhile investment? Now, if you look on the prices wise, this older version sells about $1,200 with a little bit of accessories on the side, and this one is $1,400. So basically what Sony is saying is, if you want to buy the old one, it's just as good as the new one, but they're coming out and saying it is a much better camera. Now, if you have watched all the reviews, they're talking about how great this camera is. But what we need to look at is what is really different about this camera. First of all, we have the battery. The battery is a new battery that is used in their full frame lineup, and that battery is going to give you more shots. Now, I don't know about you, but unless it's an extremely important commercial shoot that's for fashion, I rarely shoot 2,000 shots in one single raw or one single day. I usually go about 1,000 to 1,500, but not over 2,000, 3,000, whatever the numbers that you can get with this camera and battery combination. So what the question becomes is, what is that going to actually do? Well, it's going to do one thing, which I think was a very smart move on the Sony side, is to put a bigger battery or more powerful battery that is going to help with the vloggers. So because it's the video that is of the power. So putting in a more powerful battery gives you that advantage of being able to use it in that respect. Of course, they made it into a camera that the vloggers would love, which is they can have a flip-up screen, you put it, you can watch yourself as you film it. Now, that is a good, because those vloggers, they're going to hold it in their hand with a little microphone and watch themselves as they film it. And for an investment and return point of view, if you buy this camera at a relatively cheap price, and then you used it, you probably will be happy with it because you said, oh, I got great videos and it shoots in 4K. Imagine the 4K. You look at the A65 and you look at this one, what are you having? You're having not a real upgrade in terms of quality of the video. Now we're going to talk about the auto tracking, which I will get into, but let's talk about that. You're using the same sensor. Now in 3 years, hasn't the sensor gone up in quality? You got 24.2 megapixels, the same sensor. So what you're doing is you're selling the same car and then calling it new. Basically, you're rebatching it, just making it more pleasing, so to say. So we'll get into that a little bit later, but let's talk about the other improvement. The other improvement is the autofocus, and it's a nice improvement. We're seeing that they have included the eye tracking, which is a wonderful feature because, frankly speaking, it is one of the better systems, autofocus systems out in the market for capturing stills. Now, I highlight that's because capturing stills is very different than video, because video is doing, let's say, 24 frames a second in a continuous motion. So what you're seeing is your eyes is seeing the differences as the pictures are displayed in front of you at a speed of 24 frames per second. So you're actually seeing it if there is any hiccups. So what the camera system is doing, the autofocus system is doing, is trying to capture it in a way that the eye is always in focus, which is wonderful if you're doing flash photography or if you're doing photography where the action is going very well. And that is very important because you want to capture it. But that slide, that one shot, will always be in focus because it's able to calculate it to that extent. But when it gets up to 24 frames, well, it's not as good. I'll get into that in a bit. So let's go back to the still frames. So you got the eye tracking, which is a wonderful feature. You're going to get better shots, faster shots, that is going to be more accurate. Your fail rate is going to decrease. Yet, when you look at it, it is a system. It's a system that has still a lot of improvements that needs to come and be introduced over the years. So, as a videographer's camera, it has done one thing that was right, and that is to put a mic jack. Now, the mic jack, if you were to purchase it, it costs about $10. So you're figuring, how come they didn't put this in the other models, like the A6100? I mean, they could have put that, but they didn't want to cannibalize on the A6600. So what you are actually having is a camera that's designed for vloggers, and it is designed in a way that is going to give you a relatively decent image when you're doing vlogging. And you'll say, what about this eye tracking for video? Well, there are problems with it, because if you have an isolation, you're walking on the beach, there's the sea in the background, and you have the beach, and there's nobody else around, and you're spinning around, the camera is able to relatively track you well. What the problem happens is if you're stationary, because what the autofocus system is trying to do is trying to always calculate to ensure that your eye is in focus. So when it is unsure and you moved your head just a little bit back or forth or sideways, or you had a little movement that made the camera think that you are actually in motion, then it attempts to readjust. And what it does is that it thinks that it has a chain focus when it hasn't, and it will be a blurry image. Now, I'm not going to show you examples of it, because there are plenty of examples of that. If you go onto YouTube, search for it, you're going to see that auto tracking on the video is relatively weak. So what does that do? What does that do means is those videographers that have shot videos hoping that they're going to get great image and incredibly stationary images when they're doing video, they're not going to get that. They're going to get blurry shots once in a while, and they can't really edit that out because it is doing what it's supposed to do, which is to track the autofocus. Autofocus means that the subject is moving or having a kind of a motion. So if the subject is still and is trying to do that, it causes hiccups. So it is not actually designed in that fashion. Also, you'll find that when there's a clutter of information that is in the screen, for example, you have like 5 people or 6 people, the camera is going to think that it is hunting, and hunting for the eye focus or whatever that image is, and moving it from one focus point to the other. You have to tap the screen. What happens then? You're shaking the camera, and when you shake the camera, you're going to shake the image. So it's going to have shaky images when you're doing video. So that's not going to work. So what the problem is that tapping thing is not going to work as good. What should have happened, and that is the thing, is that if you put the focus on one person, that person is moving, then it should keep that focus quite well. When there are 2 subjects in the frame and you want to transfer to the other, it becomes a problem. And it has a problem when it's tracking it. So in that respect, I think there's a quite a distance that it still needs to go to get that thing. That is a good video camera for vlogging. Now, the problem with vlogging, as I said, is that nobody wants to learn the shutters, the how to operate the camera, or how to set it, or put it into a state where somebody's actually watching the monitor or ensuring the focus. Or now they don't know how to use the depth of field properly to have maybe a different aperture that gets more things into focus. So the end result is a situation where they are going to have hit and miss kind of circumstances for videographing. Yet the technology is such that this is the best almost of what we got in the systems. If you are comparing it to, let's say, one of the other companies that do it. Now, there is a better camera out there, which I will get into, and I will do a side-by-side comparison and talk a bit more about it. But this camera has become the camera of choice for those entry-level users. And what they have done is they have gone and improved the autofocus system for those photographers by putting 425 points for phase and contrast detection. Incredibly good idea. You cover 85% of the screen. You get the pictures in focus relatively good. The problem I have with the A6600 is that the Colorscience lacks it. Now, for those who have seen the photographs that have come out of it, look at that picture that we have of that whale coming out of the water and the background. It looks very two-dimensional. It does not have that three-dimensionality. And look at the colors of the water and the background. It just seems like a mush. What you want to have is the details, the micro contrast. You want to have a bit of three-dimensionality. Of course, that has a lot to do with the lens, but also has to do with the way the color science is, the color science and the way it is registered in the system. Now, mind you, the other companies have had a long time perfecting this, and Sony is saying, this is the way I see it, and they're still doing catch-up, but their color science especially is one that needs definitive improvements. When I look at it, I say, this camera is good for capturing and nailing focus, but when it comes to color science, we are going to have issues. Which brings me the other important point, which is the HLG, which is you can do a high resolution, high dynamic range video that is going to give you a very pleasing image. Of course, there are limitations there because how much this camera actually outputs is 100 megabits per second, which is very low compared to what other cameras are offering. So what we're seeing here is this very limited data that is supposed to be a very good camera, but very little data to have a really good image. So what you're doing is having a lot of compression, and then at the end of the day, you're trying to get a good image out of it. Especially on video side, there is a whole bunch of things that could have been done better, and they could have put in more information that could have been processed. Now, which brings me to the other point. They have the older slot for the memory card. When was it still that they still had the first generation? I mean, if you think about it, the first generation has got very slow card reading capabilities, and that means you're not going to have that UH2 where you can upload a lot of information onto the card very fast. This is going to limit the capabilities of this camera. So even if they came up with firmwares and everything else, the data bit rate is not going to go up. So you cannot actually improve on the video capabilities of this camera with firmwares because it is limited by the amount of information you can transfer onto that card, which is very slow. And if you do photographs with it and you do still images and you say you do in burst mode with, let's say, 11 frames per second, which on silent, by the way, is 8, well, you're going to see 45, 46 images is what they're saying, and they're more like 40. You're going to have the image stop on screen as it uploads and records and records, and you're looking at the screen going, oh, it's buffering. What that means is that the camera is very slow in that recording time. And all it needed to do was put a UH2, and what would have happened? What would have happened is that it would have been able to record that information a lot faster, so we didn't have to look at dead screens, and we didn't have to wait for the photographs to come in. And sometimes when you're doing fast action photography or certain things, you want to be able to capture that. And upgrading to a higher one that is going to be able to record better information in terms of cards, memory cards, is going to open up the gateways to improvements, but you can't do it now. So you might be asking, why has Sony done this? Well, they are prone to things that other companies are. If you have used, for example, flash photography systems like ProPhoto, which is a very high-end camera lighting system, what you're going to find is that they produced A1, which is relatively the same kind of flash that you will have, more or less equivalent to what the Canon flash is. And then, they said, oh, you get a lot of photographs with this. You can use the ProPhoto, and then a lot of wedding photographers jump on the board. They say, I gotta buy it. And then a few months later, we have the A1X. What happened there? Oh, we improved on it. Well, I think you had improved on it in the first place, but you just wanted to make more money out of it. So everybody bought the A1, and then the A1X comes out. You get more number of pictures and with the per flashes, and then you're gonna get a faster recharge rate. I think it's 0.2 seconds more. So what you're saying is, we had this technology, we made more money out of it. The same thing with the B10. They had B10, it was a good flash. People measured it and they said, oh, well, it's more or less about the same as a regular flash, but it's a little bit more powerful. Okay, fair enough. And then what happened? B10 Plus came out, and then B10 Plus is considerably a worthwhile investment compared to B10, but again, here is the company's desire to make money. Similarly, Blackmagic is still prone to that. They take Blackmagic 4K, Pocket Cinema comes out, everybody's crazy about it. Incredibly great camera, incredibly game-changing camera, revolutionary in all respects. But then comes out the 6K. So what do? You look at the 4K and it's not as good anymore. Well, the thing is, in that arena, it makes a difference when you have 4K and 6K. It's not because you're going to use the 4K or the monitored result for 4K. It's because it's going to allow you to frame the image when you're in post. You can shift the image, enlarge it a little bit, or have a kind of a motion that you can create in Premiere or other softwares. So that is what it was intended to do. So here we're having the same sensor, and we're looking at this camera that is basically improved only in terms of battery, maybe autofocus. And autofocus, again, is as good as is usability. And for me, that is what is important. Now, there is also what they call time code, which I don't think anybody is ever going to use to match the external sound with the internals of the camera, which is the recording of the video. So we use that all the time. We have very expensive systems, and we make sure that the sound that we record externally matches the sound we get on set. But this is very different. You're trying to do that on a camera system that is going to have as much as a time coder, and that's going to run as much as the camera itself. So that's a very different way of looking at it. There's also no flash. There is no flash on that camera, and what that means is that you're going to have to make a compromise. Now, the compromise comes in terms of, did you ever use the flash? Did you ever need the flash? Well, sometimes you need it. The sun is very strong and you don't want as much shadow, or you want to have a different kind of look as a fill-in. It could have been useful. I don't see it as vital, but for the applications of this camera, it would have been useful. And taking it out, of course, is getting less. And what you are getting in return is what makes it interesting. Because when you look at it, this phone like camera, which I'm calling phone like because the smartphones shoot similar quality of videos almost, because you can get 4Ks and stuff, and if you put it side by side with a smartphone like iPhone and you watched it on a small screen, I don't think you're going to be able to tell much of a difference. The difference comes in the ability to process that information, and that's where the game is, to be able to process the information. So what we are going to have is probably within a year is we're going to have the A6700 that's going to have the upgraded memory card slot, and then you're probably going to get maybe an improvement on the autofocus, and you're going to say to yourself, I should have bought this one instead. Okay, but if you're in the market and you desperately need to buy that compact camera for videographing or for photography, for all the other stuff, well, there is the Fuji X-T3. Now, why is it a better camera? Well, that's the discussion of our next review. For now, let's recap it just a bit. First of all, you're going to look at this and look at the camera in terms of the way it functions. You have the 4D focus, which is a 425 points contrast system and phase detection, beautiful. You got that side all taken care of. You got eye tracking, beautiful. You have a few more lenses that is going to improve this lineup, fair enough. Yet you still are wrestling the same problem, which is you still got issues with the Colorscience, the flat-looking images, and video that is somewhat iffy. For me, worthwhile investment would be something else. But having said that, I think the decision to buy this camera solely lies upon the choice of lenses you may have had in the past. So if you come from a point where you had Sony A6500 and a whole bunch of lenses, which I have sitting in the other room because I bought some of those cameras, and I had the A6500, which I sold, by the way, is because they're sitting there, and I didn't see the point of selling those lenses, so they're sitting there. What will happen is that when the next version, or the version that I think is worthwhile investment, comes out, then I'll buy it and put these on, and it will give me the look that I'm needing and the things that I need. What is important, though, is to see how it's going to balance on the camera itself, because you look at these new lenses like the long focal length ones and the other ones, they're compact, but still, and compared to the size of this camera, it's relatively big. And I'll see it as 16 to 55, which is 24 to 70 kind of range, as not as usable because the lens is almost bigger than the camera, and it actually is. So it is a better matter of ergonomics. Now the handle on that camera, the A6600, is better because of a larger battery. Yet again, it is one thing that I would consider carefully before looking into it. Now, I hope this has been an informative update and review on this camera, and I hope that you watch the next review when I compare the Sony A6600 to Fuji X-T3. I thank you for watching.